I'm RUSS MCLEAN, Chair of the Patient Voices Group for Pennine, Lancashire, and today I'm talking to Mr Kevin McGee, Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust. Kevin, first of all, hello.
Hello, Russ.
Hope you're rested after your recent holiday.
Yes, it was nice. It was a nice break. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you're back in the thick of it, and I want to start by talking about a subject that we have covered a couple of times before, and that's the fracture clinic. So first of all, I'd like you to remind us how that came about, the fact that the fracture clinic services in Burnley have been moved to Blackburn.
So the fracture clinic that we ran in Burnley was a clinic that was held on average once every couple of weeks. And the guidance is very clear that all patients should be treated who need to have fractures fixed, should be treated within 72 hours. We were finding it very difficult to staff the service over in Burnley, so what we've done is concentrated on one site in Blackburn, with the objective being that all patients should be seen and treated within the 72 hours.
Well, on that note, I have received a letter from a woman who shall remain nameless, but she told me that her sister had visited the urgent care centre at Burnley and was needed. She needed an appointment. She was given an appointment for 7 days to the fracture clinic here at Blackburn. But the member of staff, her sister in the department, says that apparently this was a quick department and that it can sometimes be 2 or 3 weeks before an appointment is available. So she goes on to say, if I recall, your excuse, as she puts it, for the transfer of services was to meet the British Orthopaedic Association standard of 72 hours, and therefore that didn't quite fit with what you were saying.
Well, I would like to follow that through, and I will absolutely give a guarantee that I will follow that through, because all the work that we've done and all the audits that we've done show that patients are being treated within that 72 hours. So if there are exceptions, then that's not acceptable, and I will follow that through and investigate.
Thanks very much for that. You've recently enjoyed a lot of good press, and that's always good. One of the stories was around the proposed dialysis unit, and I know you've got to be very careful because things are still going through early stages, but in particular the new Metaphor robotic scan trainers. This is a new ultrasound trainer that I was very pleased to have been invited to the launch of. The question was, if you're in debt, where is the cash coming from?
So we always have to be very mindful of how we use our resources, but in actual fact East Lancs Hospitals Trust isn't doing too badly financially. I mean, we achieved our financial duties for last year, and our objective this year is that we do the same again this year. So although cash is very, very tight, we are performing better than most from a financial perspective. And even in the most difficult circumstances, there is always some resources to improve services and develop services, but clearly there is choices, and these are two areas where we've made some difficult choices, but we think it's important that we invest in these areas, and we have done so.
And another good news story, staying in that same vein, is about the robotic surgery, which has been given the green light. Would you explain to our listeners what that is?
So this is a very sophisticated piece of kit that we invested in about a year ago, and it's really, really important because most places in the country now undertake robotic surgery, and it's basically, as it said, it's surgery that's guided by the clinicians, but it uses quite sophisticated robotic techniques to improve and pinpoint the surgery, which improves outcomes and reduces the length of time that people need post-recovery. So it's really, really important that the residents of East Lancashire, and indeed the wider Lancashire, should have access to these services, because they're available in most other parts of the country, and Lancashire is one of the few parts of the country that didn't have it. So we took a decision, we invested in this kit over a year ago. I have to say it's been quite a difficult debate and conversations with commissioners and with specialist commissioning and with other partners across Lancashire, but eventually it's been agreed that this service will be available to right across Lancashire. It'll be provided by East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, and it's now funded and commissioned. So I'm really delighted about this service.
Brilliant news. Now, again, in the press this week and in all forms of social media, you've took the unusual step, I think, of warning the public to stay away from A&E. How much of a problem are you facing with your accident and emergency departments?
So we've been under a lot of pressure in terms of our accident and emergency department. I tend to work on the fact that over the on any given day, if we have between 450 up to 500 patients attending our A&E urgent care department across the patch, we'll be able to cope. but we've had on many days well in excess of 500, and some number of days 600 plus patients attending, and that causes us real pressure and real problems. So it has been difficult. I think the recent very hot weather has also not helped with things such as respiratory problems, etc. So the length of time that people have had to wait within, particularly our A&E department on the Blackburn site, has on occasions been in excess of the 4 hours. That's not something we are proud of. It's something we want to improve upon. So what we're trying to say is, if you need our A&E services, if you need our urgent care services, of course turn up. You will be treated, and you will be treated safely and effectively. But just think about whether you do need those services, and could it wait? Could you go to your GP, or could you go to pharmacists, or is there some other sort of form of self-treatment? So really just think about whether you need the service. And as I said, if you do, of course you'll be treated, but please think about it.
And of course that's something that other hospital trusts in the area have also done, asked patients to think very carefully about where they're going to go for treatment. Can I ask you then, does things like the football that's on the moment, does that cause a surge in appointments and attendances at A&E?
So we have been planning and looking at our staffing for any big sort of national events, but particularly issues around football. And it's a really sad thing, but we do see an upsurge in the likes of domestic violence, for instance, when there are big football events on. So we have planned for it. We have looking to put on. We are looking to put on additional staff, and we have done so. And that's just part of the planning that we do day in, day out. But you're right, this is not just a problem for East Lancashire in terms of the numbers through A&E. This is a national problem. It seems to be at the present, for whatever reason, particularly bad across Lancashire, and some of our other acute providers across Lancashire are also under a lot of pressure. We will get through this, we will improve, but again, just the message, just think about really whether you need to turn up or not.
I know we had to be very careful about apportioning blame, but do you think that a lot of it is still because patients are struggling to get GP appointments?
I think it's a really complicated thing, and if there was just one answer, then we would have solved it. So I think there are pressures in terms of primary care, but then there's pressures in terms of social care, in terms of people being discharged from hospital. We have our problems in terms of being able to staff all of our services, and there's sometimes when there's gaps in staffing. So I think it's very, very complicated, and if there was just one issue, we would have solved it.
You recently had the National Impatient Survey results, which were very interesting. I think, from memory, something like 88% of patients were happy. Are you able to give us some more information about that?
Yeah, so this is very new information. It's really important information. So every year there's a big national survey of what patients are saying about the local hospitals, and we take it really seriously because we get some really good information, both good and areas we need to improve. We're currently just in the process of understanding what it's saying, and clearly that there are some really significant improvements from last year, but there's also some areas where we know we could have done better and we need to do better. So we're currently digesting the impatient survey. It'll be part of how we improve services going forward. I'd just like to thank everybody who took part in it, and when it comes around next year, just encourage more and more people to get involved, because the more we understand what our patients and their families and our communities are saying about us, that's the best way we can understand and improve services.
Food and drink is very important to people, not only in hospital but in general, and of course that means not just inpatients but staff and the visitors and loved ones too. You've recently completed a very big piece of work, which was a food and drink strategy, and I was involved in that. But could you tell me why the Trust has particularly looked at that area?
Yeah. Well, first, Russ, just to say thank you for all the work that you've done. You've really done a great piece of work supporting our dietetics department and the clinical teams in terms of looking at food and nutrition within the organisation. So thank you. I mean, it's really, really important, isn't it? I mean, it's an obvious thing, but the food and drink that we consume really helps and supports patients in hospital. So it's really important that it's of the highest standard and quality possible. We know we could have done better, and hence we undertook the work on the strategy. So we've gone through everything in every area of food and drink consumption in the organisation. So that's both in terms of what patients have on an inpatient basis, look to make it of the highest standard possible and the highest nutritional standard possible. And clearly, things are changing on as we get more knowledge of what's good for us and what's bad for us, and we need to reflect that in the menus. But also simple things such as vending machines. If you went back, in most hospitals, vending machines would consist of crisps, chocolate and pop and not much else. Now, we still have some of that, but we've also tried to put healthy snacks in the vending machine so that people have choices, and that's really important. So it is a good piece of the business. We've done a really good piece of work looking at our food and drink strategy. And I'm sure in a year's time we'll probably come back and revise it, because as we get more knowledge and we get more understanding of what's good for us, then our food and drink strategy will need to reflect that.
Kevin, I've recently had a couple of elderly patients contact me concerned about their time at the Royal Blackburn Hospital where they've been inpatients, and that members of staff hadn't been given the name. I understand that the Royal Blackburn, in fact East Lancs Hospital Trust, together with both CCGs, have make a very big thing about staff telling patients who their name is. What went wrong, do you think?
Well, that does sadden me, because one of the things we do pride ourselves on is that everybody should introduce themselves when they talk to patients or their relatives with "Hello, my name is." That should be the very first thing, and we pride ourselves on treating people with respect and dignity, and introducing yourself in this way is part of that. So that does upset me that has happened. What I can't comment on these individual cases, but what I will do is take that away and re-emphasise the importance of that first initial contact with all our staff. And I would hope that every member of our staff, in any contact with any patients or relatives, always takes that first step by saying, "Hello, my name is."
You've recently had another addition to the hospital in the form of Imam Faisal Hassan, who's the Muslim chaplaincy and religious advisor. My question really around that is, how do trusts work with the Muslim community, and does it differ very much from the work with other communities in the area?
Well, I think we need to do more on this. I think we have really good relationships with the Muslim communities and with other faith communities within the hospital and the services that we run. However, it's fair to say that I think we need to do more. We need to reach out to those communities. What I've found since I've been in post within East Lancashire Hospitals Trust is our Muslim community is a great supporter of the hospital. They raise money for us and they're very, very supportive of us. So we need to recognise that, and we need to think about how we can support them and their needs in a better way.
Presumably we're coming through Ramadan into Eid. Do different periods in the Muslim calendar have an effect on the hospital, perhaps particularly in the A&E department?
I'm not sure in terms of flow of patients into the organisation, although it's an interesting question and one that we probably need to do more work on to understand. But it can affect us sometimes just in terms of staffing, for instance. So we're a big organisation. We employ 7,500 staff, and sometimes we use our own agency staff or bank staff to cover shifts, and it can be at times more difficult to cover those areas. But our staff are brilliant. They're really staff of all faiths are really brilliant, and they try and help and support whenever they can to cover the work patterns and cover shifts, and they're very, very flexible. I think we just need to understand the implications of the different religious calendars and build that into our staffing rotas.
We've mentioned staff, and seeing as we have mentioned them, let's stay on that. Are you is your staffing levels currently good, bad? You were recruiting. I know there has been some media coverage around that, around recruitment days and things. But how is, in general, your staffing?
So we are still got a really active recruitment drive. I think it's really good that we've got the resources to try and employ more doctors and more nurses, and we're really, really pushing on that. But there is some national shortages within the NHS, particularly of doctors and nurses on the emergency pathway. So in A&E departments nationally, in some of the medical wards nationally, there are shortages, and we suffer from that, as with most organisations. So we're trying to make ourselves more attractive, we're trying to be more flexible in terms of the rotas that we employ, and we're trying to encourage staff to come and work with us. I think what helps is the reputation of the organisation. So clearly an organisation that seems to be in difficulty, as we perhaps were 2 or 3 years ago, it's not so attractive to staff. I think now that we are seen to be in a well-performing organisation, we've got great staff satisfaction surveys, etc. I think it all helps with the reputation of the organisation, and it helps to attract staff to the area.
We're on the verge of a rather big referendum. I'm not going to ask you personally whether you're in or out. It wouldn't be fair to do that to you, but does that, or will that have an effect on staffing at the hospital, do you think? Will it have a detrimental effect?
I think, to be honest, I think it's really difficult to say. I mean, we attract staff that's fair to say, on an international basis. I mean, we've just gone out and had a recruitment drive in the Philippines. So, we will attract staff from all quarters. Whether the referendum, whether we're in or out, will have an impact on that, I think it's too early to say. But we will need to still continue to attract staff on an international basis.
Complaints. Thankfully, you're getting less of them than you were 12 months ago, and that seems to be a trend year on year. But if someone is unhappy with the services that they receive at East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, can you tell me, Kevin, what the process would be for them to instigate a complaint, and what happens then?
So what we're trying to do is to try and sort this at source, if I can put it that way. So, if a patient is in hospital and they're not happy, or their relatives are not happy with the services that they provide, what we try and do is bring sort of a senior nurse or doctor to speak to the patient and the relatives before they actually leave the hospital, so we can understand what their issues are. We also have a team called PALS, the Patients Advice and Liaison Services, and they're there to support patients and relatives who may not be happy with the services that they provide. So we try and stop it to get from formal complaints by dealing with PALS or senior staff talking to patients and relatives. However, it's really important that if patients and their relatives are not happy with their services, they can have a formal process to go through. So what I always say is, put your concerns in writing, address it to me as the chief executive, and then it goes through a formal complaints process within the organisation. So once the complaint comes into me, I send it through to our complaints department and team. They will pick it up, they will get the relevant clinicians and departments involved, and we will investigate thoroughly. We will then give a response to the patient or the family who've raised the concern, and we can then go through a process whereby we can meet with the families and the relatives and the patients, or we can deal with in a written format. So there's a very formal process that we can go through. And I would always encourage people, if they're not happy with what the services that are received, please do write to us, because that's how we pick up the issues, that's how we learn to improve. So, it's really important that people feel confident that they can complain, and if they need to complain, we need to respond appropriately.
I'd like to pick you up on something that you just said, which was rather interesting, because you reiterated something you told me some months ago, and that is that you see all complaints. Is that still the case?
No, that is the case. So I sign every complaint letter that comes into the organisation, and I sign the response. And I firstly sign it to say that it's been clinically reviewed by either the medical director or the nursing director, and then secondly I read them to understand what the issues are that patients are raising. Now, I can't respond clinically, but it's important that I have an understanding of what the issues are that people are raising with us about complaints.
I'd like to finish on the Care Quality Commission and the recent visit to two of the hospitals in the Trust. That was the Royal Blackburn Hospital here in Blackburn and the Burnley General, of course, in Burnley. How happy are you with that recent inspection?
I'm To be honest, I'm delighted because both of our main hospitals now, the two main sites in Blackburn and Burnley, have been rated good, and that's for the services right the way across the board in those two hospitals. I mean, if you think about 3 years ago or so, the organisation was in special measures and the services were rated inadequate. For them now to be rated good is a tremendous turnaround, and it's been based on the hard work and dedication of the teams, the clinical teams, the support staff, the ancillary staff within the organisation. I think every member of the ELHT team should be really proud of the services that they deliver now. We know there's more that we can do, and my aspiration for these services is that in the next couple of years they receive an outstanding award, and I think we can do it. We can build on what we've done. We're in a good place. We've got a good recognition. Now I want us to get to outstanding.
Kevin McGee, Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Russ.